Welcome to the Chuck Whitlock Show, What's the Matter?, where we invite experts from every walk of life to discuss everyday issues affecting our community, your family, and you. Because if it matters to you, it matters to us. You may have seen him on The Oprah Winfrey Show, The View, Extra, or hundreds of other shows. Here's your host, Chuck Whitlock.
The telephone has provided us with a great deal of convenience, but in the past few years, it also has become the source of nuisance calls, and often the means for con artists to conduct fraudulent activity. Did you know that 30 billion robocalls were made just last year alone? That means that every adult in the U.S. received over 100 incoming robocalls originating from computers and algorithms. What's the matter? Up for discussion today, it's nuisance calls and fraudulent calls dominating our bandwidth. At best, it seems to be an invasion of your privacy. At worst, it is a way to defraud you out of your hard-earned money. So, what can you do to protect yourself? We're going to introduce our guests and uncover some answers right after this commercial break. Stay tuned. Before we get started, let's watch a short video from the Federal Trade Commission that discusses what defines a robocall and which types of automated calling are illegal.
If you have a telephone, robocalls may be ruining your day. I'm Katie Daffin, an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission. If you answer the phone and hear a recorded message instead of a live person, it's a robocall. If the recording is a sales message and you haven't given your written permission to get calls from the company on the other end, the call is illegal, period. So, when you get an illegal robocall, here's what to do. Hang up the phone. Don't press 1 to speak to a live operator, and don't press any other number to get off the list. If you respond by pressing any number, it will probably just lead to more robocalls. You might consider contacting your phone provider and asking them to block the number and whether they charge for that service. Remember that telemarketers change caller ID information easily and often, so it might not be worth paying a fee to block a number that will change. Finally, contact the FTC to report your experience. You can do that online at ftc.gov or by calling 1-877-FTC-HELP. To learn more about illegal robocalls and what the FTC is doing to stop them, visit ftc.gov/robocalls. That's ftc.gov/robocalls.
Okay, Detective Ron Beasley, you deal with fraudulent telephone call complaints. What advice do you have for our viewers so that they don't become victims of these fraudulent calls?
Well, the first thing I can tell you is these people who make these fraudulent calls do this all day, every day. So they can be extremely convincing, especially to somebody who has had no contact with the police when they get a call that says, hello, I'm Lieutenant such and such with such and such department, and you've missed a court date, and we need you to pay a fine to avoid going to jail. What I can tell you is no legitimate law enforcement agency, whether it be federal, state, or local, will ever have you pay a fine using gift cards or anything like that over the phone. That's just never legitimate.
So you always know if somebody represents that they're with a law enforcement agency asking for money, this is a fraudster, hang up.
Correct.
What should a person that hangs up do? Should they contact your department?
They should call whoever their local agency is and report it. Try and record the phone number, try and remember everything the person said, the name they used, exactly the manner in which they wanted you to pay this fine or whatever they wanted you to do, yes.
What are the phone scams that people have been most likely to fall for?
In my experience, most of them are where a person calls and says that they are an officer with your local department. They will have a phone number that has the area code that's used where you live. They will tell, typically these are elderly people who've had very little contact with the police, aren't familiar with the way the system works. What they'll say is, you missed jury duty, we've got a warrant for your arrest. In order for us to not arrest you, you have to pay us X number of dollars, and we want you to do that in gift cards.
Can you imagine going to a court with a traffic fine and paying with a gift card? Here's a gift card.
Yeah, it's there. Nobody's going to accept it. You know, it's not legitimate. But you know, you combine somebody who's had very little dealings with law enforcement or the court system with somebody, as I said, who does this all day, every day, and they can be very, very convincing, and that's what you get.
I received a telephone call yesterday saying it was from Microsoft. Somebody hacked my computer and I had to call immediately. Mm-hmm. What was really going on? How did they extract money from me?
My guess would be that, first of all, that call was from overseas. Had you called them, they would have told you that someone hacked your computer, there's a virus in it, they can fix the virus, but for a fee. And it probably would have been, you paid them through gift cards.
But there isn't a virus?
Probably not.
Are there any other scams that you can share with us that people might want to be on the lookout for?
Well, there's in sort of the same vein as the law enforcement scam, there's the IRS scam where someone calls you and pretends to be an agent with the Internal Revenue Service. You owe them money for back taxes, you need to pay it again through gift cards. Obviously that's not legitimate. There's the grandparent scam where someone will call a person and say, it's your grandson, I've been arrested, call this number, this is my attorney. When you call that person, they tell you that you need to pay a certain amount of money for me to assist your grandchild in getting out of jail. We get a lot of calls where they've won some sort of a sweepstakes or a contest, but the contest took place overseas. And in order to receive your prize money, you need to pay some taxes and international legal fees and things of that nature. And as long as the person's paying, the caller will contact them back, and there's always a new fee or always a new tax. And before you know it, the person's out tens of thousands of dollars, and of course they're not getting any prize or anything. They haven't won a thing.
I know in the course of my own travels, what I found out was that crooks sell the mark list. A victim is called a mark in the world of con artists. And once they have a list of, let's say, 1,000 people that have fallen for a particular scam, that list is then sold to another con artist who comes right back and tries to con them in a different way. How do you differentiate between a legitimate robocall and an illegal offer? Must be kind of hard.
I mean, honestly, one of the best rules of thumb is if you don't recognize the number, just don't answer it.
So really the key in fraud, unlike other types of crime, is prevention.
Prevention.
It's doing exactly what you're doing today.
Yes, prevention. Don't lose the money in the first place. Try not to fall for it.
Well, hopefully our show today is going to help others to do exactly that, not become a victim of a scam.
I hope so.
Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments and suggestions today. And remember that if something about a telephone call appears suspicious, just hang up. After this commercial break, we'll be interviewing the Do Not Call coordinator with the Federal Trade Commission, where we'll learn about what the FTC is doing on a larger level to control this automated epidemic. Ian Barlow, you're the head of the No Call program with the Federal Trade Commission. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Tell us when the program started and from your experience, how the rollout has worked.
Well, this is not a new program. The Do Not Call Registry is one of our older and most popular initiatives. And we've had the Do Not Call rules implemented in 2004, and then Robocall rules implemented in 2009. And we've been bringing cases to enforce those rules the whole time. And through that enforcement program, we've brought 138 lawsuits against 454 businesses, 367 individuals, real people behind the companies, and we've collected $121 million in those lawsuits.
What can the consumer do to stop the robocalls?
So we have standard advice we give to all consumers. It's not going to eliminate all robocalls, but it can help. And so the first thing is register for the Do Not Call list. This does a couple things. First, it makes sure that you won't get calls from the telemarketers that do follow the law. Some of them are compliant and honor do not call requests. But it also, registering lets you know that if somebody calls you, sell you something, even though you're already on the do not call list, then you know it's an illegal call. So that's why we tell people to register. Second, hang up. If you get an illegal call, just hang up on it. If it's a sales message or a sales message to a number on the do not call list, it's illegal, hang up. Third, report unwanted calls at donotcall.gov. The more data we have, the better. And fourth, block. We recommend consumers download a call blocking application or look into it. For cell phones, there are apps available in the app stores. And for landline phones, many providers now offer call blocking solutions. We get about 500,000 complaints per month about unwanted calls. Obviously, there's no way to follow up on each complaint individually. So that's why the more data we have, the better. We can analyze the data, track trends, and target our enforcement against the worst practices and worst violators.
What can the FTC do to help the consumer avoid this kind of fraud? As you and I both know, seniors sometimes are lonely. They have diminished capacity in many cases, and so they fall victim to fraud. What can the FTC do to stop those kind of calls and to prosecute those perpetrators?
We talk with folks like you in the media, and we meet with local sheriffs, local communities, and we have an entire bureau of consumer outreach that works to educate consumers on frequent scams. We have consumer blogs on the FTC website, and we really want consumers to learn about these scams and how to avoid them. And we have a campaign specifically for older Americans called Pass It On, where we ask them, once they learn about how to avoid scams, to pass it on to their friends.
I would think that you could establish a pattern. In other words, if you receive 1,000 complaints that the Microsoft scam is being perpetrated, that would give you a pattern of fraud that you could then prosecute, as opposed to someone not complaining. Maybe you get 2 complaints, maybe it's a fraud, maybe it isn't, maybe it's a misunderstanding. So I'm thinking we need to encourage the viewers to actually continue to file complaints when they believe a fraud is being perpetrated via the phone.
If it's an unwanted call, a fraudulent call, abusive call, any kind, if you're at all suspicious, report it at donotcall.gov. 100% agreement with you.
How many of these robocall centers are there in the United States, Ian? Are they all over? Is it a handful? Are they onshore or are they offshore?
There's both. There's a large onshore call center industry, and there's also a very large off-center call center industry. And in some instances, the telemarketing scams work in conjunction, where they have some sales openers offshore, and then they transfer consumers to a sales closer onshore. The more pure fraud, the IRS fraud, the tech support scams, those are more focused overseas than domestically.
Okay, so it's very hard to find those perpetrators, those fraudsters in Russia or wherever they're from. So there's probably not a great deal that you or any law enforcement agency can do about it other than educate the consumer.
Look, in 2016, the Treasury Inspector General's office worked with Department of Justice, and they brought a series of arrests in India for Indian call center fraud. They worked with our overseas partners. So it's not impossible to bring law enforcement against bad actors overseas who target American citizens, but it's much easier for consumers to protect themselves and to learn how to identify fraud and how to report it. And we have a ton of information on our website for consumers how to avoid scams, and it's very easy to report at donotcall.gov.
Ian, before I lose you, please just recap for us, what can we do to stop robocalls and fraudulent calls? The entire country is being inundated with them. What do we have to do?
Our best advice is going to help consumers limit the number of calls. It's not going to eliminate all of them, but it's going to limit it. 1, register for the do not call list at donotcall.gov. 2, hang up on any unwanted, abusive, or fraudulent call. Just hang up. Don't stay on the phone with them. 3, report unwanted calls at donotcall.gov. And 4, consider a call blocking application for cell phones or your home phone.
All right, Ian, head of the Do Not Call list with the Federal Trade Commission. I really appreciate your coming on today. It's really good to hear from the man that's sitting at the top of this whole problem. You've got your hands full, man. I appreciate the job you're doing.
Thanks very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So how can you do your part to fight back against nuisance calls? How big of an impact can you make from the comfort of your home? Answers to these questions when we return. Laura Matthews, you're a volunteer with AARP, and we're talking to you today about how you're involved in these nuisance robocalls and how to stop them. Tell me first about your experience with robocalls and how you became a volunteer in the first place.
About 2 weeks ago, I started getting these calls from 716 area code, and they just never stopped. And in that process of time, I had been calling the Do Not Call toll-free number and reporting them. Because I am an AARP volunteer, I knew some other steps I could take to protect myself.
Like what?
One step would be to call the AARP fraud hotline.
Why are robocalls wrong if they're legitimate businesses trying to do business with you?
Because I'm not asking for their services, and they're calling, at 9:30 at night or, 6 o'clock in the morning. They're just not appropriate.
So they're nuisance.
Right. What I was told was happening is as soon as I would put it in the Do Not Call registry, somebody was putting my number back out there for these solicitations to continue.
But the problem is, if that same marketing company changes the number each time, you're still getting the robocalls. How can AARP help me?
AARP can give you strategies to manage the robocalls, and they also take it a step further behind the scenes, and the same thing as the Do Not Call registry does. They work together with them and try to prevent this from happening.
But you know what occurs to me, Laura? And this is my last thought on this topic is, if I receive a robocall from a legitimate company trying to sell me plumbing services or landscaping services or whatever, I'm probably inclined not to do business with them regardless of how good the offer may or may not be, because they're committing an illegal act in order to present their solicitation to me. It's really good that we have this outreach opportunity, that we can use this platform to help people reduce the intrusive robocalls, and even more on a more serious plane, the fraudulent calls where people become victims.
Correct. And one other thing people can do is ask for these booklets.
Let me hold that up.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the AARP Fraud Prevention Handbook, and this one is the booklet on the alert site with the toll-free number and exactly how they can help you.
Called 13 Ways Con Artists Steal Your Money. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Nice to have you with us today, Laura.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we've learned some key pieces of information tonight. We've learned that you want to be on the Do Not Call list. We've learned that you want to look at possible apps so that they'll block the robocalls. We've also learned that if an offer over the phone sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We'll see you next time.